that's how we still do it. So in our quest to see why our schools were being underfunded, we came upon the 1999 tax exemption agreement, which is a deal between the school board and the city, which sets the terms for commercial exemptions of taxes. It does not even touch residential. We abate, according to Hamilton County Auditor Dusty Rhodes, we are now abating almost 36% of all property. We are giving away $3.4 billion a year in taxes amid a budget deficit that, as of last week, proposes to zero out many neighborhood development programs. And so we're always in this scarcity conversation, all the while handing out billions in essentially tax exemptions. Yes?
Your number includes this building also, right?
No, that number, so it's interesting because when you start to dig down into the numbers, there is a whole bunch of different things that are exempted,
right.
Like even railroads and churches. So this particular data came from a FOIA request of the city that was just looking at commercial properties and residential that was not under this category of churches, is my understanding. It also does not include Port Authority property, which is sort of an unknown, and we have a FOIA request out right now because they are not being forthwith with their data. So that's why you have to put out a Freedom of Information Act request to get data, because it's public money. This is you and I's public tax dollars at work, right? So what I want to tell you is, instead of going over a bunch of numbers, I want to share a little story that I heard last night. I was out at the Mount Washington Community Council, and I was doing what Joelle's been doing, going everywhere anybody will have me to talk about tax abatements and why we need to fix these programs. And I sat there and I gave my spiel, and everybody was shocked about what they heard, because once you get into this, you realize how really off the rails it is. And I ran into an old buddy named Michael Survey. Michael Survey used to be the city's community, it used to be called Department of Community and Economic Development. I think back then they always changed the names. But in any case, he was there, and he's just he's retired now. But he stood up at his community council meeting and he helped craft an open letter to Mercy Health. Mercy is a large hospital, right? And they, the open letter was the neighborhood expressing their extreme displeasure at Mercy's decision to abruptly and without barely any notice shut down the nurse practitioner services in the local elementary school. So if you know anything about the community learning center model, here's your public schools, and because we don't have enough money for nurses and librarians and social workers, they have to partner with outside institutions to bring that in. And so one of the partners was Mercy. They set up a nurse practitioner. This nurse practitioner was seeing an average of 9 children a day, 5 days a week. Now, mind you, most of our schools in our district don't have full-time nurses. There is no school that has a full-time nurse. So anyway, they're seeing 9 kids a day. Of course, they're billing against Medicaid mostly, because these are mostly low-income kids. And so they're getting their money back. They don't have to pay for, brick and mortar. They don't have to pay for internet. I mean, they're basically embedded in the school, making money, seeing our kids. It's a great symbiotic relationship. Well, they suddenly abruptly laid off the nurse practitioner, and they're apparently doing the same thing at the Silverton school. We had a woman from Interact for Health Foundation at the meeting. They're concerned because they've been advocating for school-based health centers. And so everybody was quite upset. And the letter went on to explain that, interestingly, Mercy has received $38 million in tax exemptions, subsidies, whatever you want to call it, abatement, exemptions. Basically, they got job creation tax credits. They got, total exemption on the property when they built their big structure in city limits. I think it was at Bond Hill where they built that new big building. So that was all exempted. So the point of the letter was that, the city of Cincinnati, we have generously given you over $38 million. And we expect at the least that you would be a good corporate partner and a neighbor. And what you've done is you've set up these great services in our schools, and now you've just pulled them out. And by the way, they've decided to take this person and they're going to put them out in Butler County and in Green Hills. So they've pulled the services and they're deciding to put them out in the suburbs, out of city limits. Why do I tell you this story? Because this brings it into very clear, a clear view of what we've been talking about, right? That these tax incentives are to stimulate investment. It's to draw in corporate partners to set up shop, create jobs, which in turn is supposed to create income taxes, right? And that was the whole point of the 1999 agreement that was set by the state legislature. It was a way for cities to incentivize investment. What has happened in the last 20 years is, again, completely off the rails. And I'm going to say something publicly and on camera that I've been hearing in many places, and that the way it's going right now, I would say, verges on corruption. And that is that when developers reportedly want exemptions, they've been asked to come to the mayor's office and have a private meeting. And during election time in 2017, they were also told to bring their checkbooks. So this is something that is completely unacceptable. This is not how we should be doing development deals in this town. And the problem is that with our research that we've done, there is no clear policy and procedure. If you ask, recently that department came out with a little brochure, a little trifold. I don't know if some of you all have seen it yet. It's like, this is how this works. And they put that together under great pressure because a lot of people said there seems to be no set rules on how people get these deals. And it seems to be we have to go through political processes, which is really not good government, right? So what is the solution? The solution is we are looking for 9 members of City Council to do some administrative rulemaking. This doesn't require a ballot initiative or any sort of charter amendment. These are literally policy changes. And we have a whole bunch of recommendations of what those could be. This was presented before the Board of Education a couple weeks ago. They include making sure that there is public disclosure and public hearings allowing for input on impacted communities, for incoming projects. When there are abatements involved, there should be some oversight. The Board of Education should have a seat on the Tax Oversight Committee. Why? Because it's really the schools that are mostly impacted by property taxes, not even the city's budget is necessarily impacted, right? The Board of Education should be able to more actively approve or reject individual developments calling for abatements in excess of $1 million. So this gets into the weeds a little bit. There's some recommendations about abatements should only be granted in lower income neighborhoods, neighborhoods that are experiencing divestment and lack of, because what we found is residential abatements are being awarded to 2 neighborhoods. Over 20% have gone to 2 neighborhoods, Hyde Park and Mount Lookout. And that was really not the original intent. And I can tell you, we are not alone in this. Recently, Columbus just amended their tax abatement policy, and Cleveland, we heard just last week, is making some changes. Because what happens is that people with resources and people who are wealthy and people who can afford lawyers, they're going to take advantage of what they can take advantage. Hey, the process is there. Who can fault them for taking advantage, right? I mean, they're there to make a profit. People like Joelle and I and John, who are our people? Our people are people who don't have high-priced lawyers and don't have access to City Hall, maybe, and who are really ending up being hurt by these procedures. So we are looking for some justice. We're looking for some equality and some equity in these procedures because it's completely out of whack. And I'll end with this point. that is that the more we exempt and abate, and it's ballooning right now because we have leadership at City Hall, and I'll just say the mayor, who professionally is a developer. I mean, that's what he does. And so he's really multiplied this whole sort of hustle, I would call it, to a point that it's exponential. I mean, exponential, and it's just not sustainable. I mean, at some point, somebody needs to pay their taxes, right? Because we need to have bridges and roads and police and fire and 911 call centers and good schools for our kids. I mean, I would like my son to have a school nurse, right? I mean, is that unreasonable? No. We all pay taxes. We think we should have these things. So there's a whole bunch of us who really aren't paying their fair share. So we need to right-size that. And while they're not paying their fair share, in effect, the rest of us who pay our full property tax bill actually end up paying more. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these levies are fixed rate levies, and that millage has to be hit. Somebody needs to pay it. So not only are you paying more because the valuation around you is going up, but they're not paying, and you are, it's also going up because increasingly more and more of us are not paying the full tax bill, so the rest of us have to pick up the slack. So this affects all of us. It really does. And I'll end with, what are we asking for? What we're asking for is at least 6 members of council to come together and agree on some administrative rule changes around how we do abatements, both commercial and residential. And we feel that's a completely reasonable request. And the grassroots part of this is that sometimes political movement and political will does not happen without some pressure. And so we are here to share these stories with you so you can go and apply your own pressure. Apply the pressure because it needs to be applied, because it's just not happening without, yes.
Why